delighted to present to you this afternoon Emel Sevinç, who has a project that is extremely, in my heart, the project that I need to be a part of. And I say that in words actually that should say to you that I am actually a part of it, because she is going to talk about our history. And I know that there are others in the room who will understand what I mean by those words. And I hope that we will be able to convey that to you and share with you this amazing project that Emel is going to tell us about. Emel, first of all, can I ask you to tell us who you are, first of all?
Sure. Thank you, actually, for having me here. I can tell you who I'm not. I'm not an academic or a scholar, and it's the first time I'm going to share my story in a platform like this, and I just hope I do a good job of it. So thank you for that. My name is Emel Sevinç. I'm born and brought up Londoner, Turkish Londoner. I'm a writer, and I am working on a project called More Than a Bundle Story.
That's it. So can you tell us a little bit about what that story is, or what your project is?
Sure. So More Than a Bundles is a project that explores the lives of members of the Turkish-speaking diaspora who arrived to London between the 1960s up until the 90s. Before the 60s, there was a high demand for labour in the British textiles industry. And as a result of this, agents and factory owners sent out invitations to skilled workers in countries such as Turkey or Cyprus or the nearby countries for tailors and seamstresses, machinists to work in the factories in London. And after the 80s, the demand wasn't as high, so the invitations stopped. Migration obviously still continued, as mentioned earlier, but the type of migrants had changed by then. So the invitation stopped, but people were arriving maybe more on as political asylum, or they were arriving as tourists and staying on within the tourist visas. So basically, this project is to capture the personal stories of the people who responded to those calls. When I first started this project, there was quite a lot of interest. But when it came to actually trying to do these interviews, I saw that there was a slight shift. Not so much with men. The uncles, the amcas were quite interested in sharing all their stories. In fact, they were more like, yaz kızım yaz, or onu yazma, yengen duymasın. But the women, and so much so, they kind of became a bit more reluctant. And it wasn't because they didn't trust the project, but it was more to do with they didn't feel that their story was valuable enough to share. So I had to think of another way of kind to approach them. And over the years, one thing I've learned from the women in our community is that if you ask them to create a time for themselves or to do anything for themselves, they won't have time because obviously their partners or their children or grandchildren or anybody else is always a priority to them. But if you ask them to help you, they'll definitely drop everything and try to help you. And that's exactly what happened. When I approached them with this project saying I'm in need with stories and to do something, to represent your stories, they were like, how can we help? And they were there straight away. So now I had to come up with an idea on what we could do to show them, to kind of portray their stories. One of the best things that I thought from our culture was like we have very good culinary skills, but then I thought of 20 Turkish mums and teyzes in one kitchen, and then I thought, none of us need that kind of stress in our life, so I had to rethink of another plan. So I thought the next best thing really was handcrafts such as crochets and knitting, and so I arranged like collective sessions where groups of women got together, where they were creating patterns and stitches of crochets, and during that time to share their stories. And that's exactly when all the stories came to air if I could say. It was across generations. At one point I looked and there was like an 80-year-old Taze there with my 10-year-old daughter showing her how to create chain stitches and patterns through crochet. But at the same time she was telling her how she'd learnt this, this work of art, and was also telling her experience in working in the clothing factories from when she first moved to London. There were women from very different backgrounds that had shared very similar experiences. So it was like a collective piece of crochet tapestry that came about, and sorry, I've lost my train of thought now. It was a community display that we've managed to put together, and as the yarn passed through their fingers, memories surfaced, and the room filled with lots of stories. And they shared not just stitches and patterns, but they shared pieces of their lives and their stories with each other. Eventually, we created this beautiful crochet tapestry. Now it stands both as an artwork and narrative, woven through personal histories and through remarkable women. And now it's a collaborative piece at Hackney Museum, which I did have a slideshow, but it's at Hackney Museum.
Do you want to have a go at putting that up so that we can see? Because
If
I
you
think
just,
it's very...
it's on the slide, so if it will just go, kind of go through, yeah. And it'll have all the details on there. Yeah. So you can just, and these are pictures of the people that I interviewed, actually. So yeah, it's something to honour the Turkish women who helped shape London's fashion, really.
If you don't mind, let's go back a little bit, just for those who are not as clear. Can you explain to us, like a single story perhaps, of someone and how they received an invitation, you said, and then they came? You know, what's that? What is that exactly?
I would love to share a single story with you, but I won't. And the reason is for that is because I would like for you to come and visit our exhibition at Hackney Museum.
Okay.
And you could discover it for yourselves.
Okay.
But I can tell you briefly, my dad, for example, he was a tailor in a small town called Bursa in Turkey. Well, Orhangazi, that is part of Bursa. And you know, business wasn't that great. So I don't think he ever actually thought to leave the country at all. But when there was an economic crisis back then, and then when he arrived, when he came across an invitation to the UK, he didn't really think twice, to be honest with you, because you know it was obvious what the economical state of the country at the time. So the idea was that they were going to come over here, work for a couple of years, and then go back to Turkey. But obviously that didn't happen.
Didn't happen. So what was your, you know, what really prompted you? What was your decision? How did this really go, right, I'm going to do this, I've decided?
There was lots of reasons why I compelled to start this project, but the first reason was my own children, because they just couldn't grasp the idea of factories or what factories were like. And when I'd say to them that I'd spend my school holidays at Erol Amca's factory, they'd look at me like I'd come out of a Charles Dickens book, like I was some kind of a chimney sweep or something. So I had to make sure that that image was not the one that they had in their head. So, but ultimately it was I wanted them to learn about what kind of reality their grandparents faced when they first arrived to London, and understand that history is quite crucial. It shapes how my identity was formed, and now theirs. Which hopefully will give them a deeper connection to where they come from. If you think about it, like as I mentioned earlier on, my parents came over at a time where they didn't speak the language, and even like for today, on my way here, I've been to this building a couple of times before, but just for that extra bit of reassurance, I had to still Google it, just a bit of safety. You know, my parents, when they came over, they didn't speak the language, they didn't come here when the internet was around, so they came to a very foreign land. The climate was different, the people were different, they had to adapt. The working conditions were very difficult, and the living conditions were incredibly difficult. I've heard stories from my mum where she said she had to share a kitchen and the bathroom with up to 10 people, 10 strangers, in fact. You know, so it wasn't easy for them. And like I mentioned with my dad, he came over to just work, and the story was quite similar across the board. They came over to just work for a couple of years and then go back, maybe buy land or start their own business or a home, or maybe to pay off debts and then just to go back. But for many, that wasn't the case. In fact, the dream of going back often existed long before they even arrived to the UK. But slowly their plans changed because people laid down their roots here. You know, marriages happened, and then individual stories of their journeys transformed into collective stories where strangers became neighbours, neighbours became family. So they were brought together not just by geography, but by shared experience and common thread, and the bundles of clothing they worked on, which became symbolic of their fate and resilience. Now, in many generations, now in the many generation elderly that I speak to, and with them we risk losing an entire archive of lived experience. So by recording, sharing their stories, I hope to ensure that their voices aren't lost and that their struggles, sacrifices, triumphs are recognised and remembered. And that's why I run my creative writing scribbles workshops. It's not just obviously for the Turkish community, but it's across the board for anyone that wants to take part. And it's to preserve those memories. It's just to re-enlighten them and to write them out so we could capture them. Ultimately, this project is about more than preserving the memories. It's about making sure our elders are seen and valued, and it's to help the next generation, like my own children, and understand how identity is shaped, and not just through culture or heritage, but through the lived experiences of those who came before myself and the next generation.
And you talk of those lived experiences, and I want to link that to Dr. Aslı Kandemir's work.
Yeah.
Could you, because it's very interesting, because she actually said that her focus group was of a certain group of young people. Could you see those values in yourself or your children, or is that what the lived experience was? Because I want to remind everyone that every single one of those photos is taken in London. Right?
Yeah.
So how would you describe it?
Oh God. I believe the project can play quite a big role in helping us understand our multicultural heritage and how it shapes our identity. We live in a very different time now. Society is a lot more understanding, and it's a lot more educated as well. So back in the 80s and 90s, growing up in between two cultures, it was incredibly challenging. And even in the diverse place, I'm from Hackney, and which was probably one of the most diverse places back then, and still now, and it was still quite difficult. At home, my mum was adamant about protecting our heritage. She insisted we only speak in Turkish, and she discouraged any kind of celebrations of any other culture, such as Christmas or Halloween or anything, because she just feared that if we didn't hold on tightly to our own heritage, we'd lose it all. Which I found really interesting, because when I came in today, somebody said, "Oh, I didn't even realise it was Bayram this weekend." My mum, if you said that next to her, Bayram was huge yesterday in our house. You know, we've kept that going. So yeah, I think that was just like embedded into us from a very young age. But then outside of the house as well, we were just ethnic and foreign, so we just never quite managed to fit in. There became a time, right at my teenage years, where you had to choose a side, where you were either you had to be more Turkish or British, or you just had to choose one or the other. And if you said something like, oh, I don't know, did you watch New Kids on the Block on Top of the Pops last night or something? I don't know, this is showing my age now, but and somebody would be like, well, why didn't you listen to Ibo or Cengiz Kurdoğlu or something like that? You know, you just kind of had to always pick a side. You couldn't do one or the other. And even if you wanted to embrace both, it just was never enough. And then that didn't stop there for me either. There was also an internal conflict within our home. It extended between my parents. My mum, very spiritual. She was quite close to her faith. She wanted to practice. She tried to pray 5 times a day where she could, but you know, she was very spiritual. You know, always like looking into fortune telling, or looked at our lives at the bottom of a coffee cup, because obviously that's factual to her. Or my dad would be like, you know, he wouldn't take things like that so seriously, and he would take, you know, for example, if he said something like, have you studied for your exam? And my mum would be like, ben ona okunmuş pirinç verdim, she's fine. You know, I've given her 3 grains of blessed rice, she doesn't need to study, you know. So that's the kind of dilemma that we have in the house within ourselves. But then my dad, being more rational, and his approach was a lot more relaxed than how my mum was. He would still fast during Ramadan, but then at the weekends, he would enjoy a drink when he was watching the football or the boxing or something, or socialising with his friends. And this left me confused as well, because obviously drinking as a Muslim, especially if I spoke to my Muslim friends, they just couldn't understand how drinking would coexist in a Muslim household. Yet that contradiction is a reality for many Turks. You know, yes, Turkey is a Muslim majority country, but drinking is also a very significant part of our culture. And that wasn't enough for my confusion, because geographically, Turkey sits neither east or west. You know, where do we fall in that? And although for me, we kept trying and trying to be European, we just wasn't accepted. Because obviously, what kind of a European eats cockroach? So that wasn't enough for us either. And then we were never Eastern enough either. So I didn't feel quite Turkish enough for my family in Turkey, or British or European enough for anybody that was in the UK. But then another dilemma happened. We had children, and we didn't know how to raise them, because raising kids is like it's an easy job as it is. How do we raise them with all the cultural influences that we had? So we didn't want to raise them in a way that they had to fit in a box, or that they were categorized, but we wanted to raise them in a way where they kind of embraced everything. So the traditions, our parents from the motherland, and the life they built for us here. Because identity isn't cultural identity isn't black and white, it's layered, it's vibrant, and it's full of nuance. And that's exactly how I personally think it should be embraced, and with richness, flexibility, and pride.
So you're proud.
I am.
That's the most important thing. I think unless you have one other thing, actually, one last thing before I go on to ask anyone. What about what's next with this project? What happens?
Oh, okay, what's next?
First, tell us where we can see this project. So your craft.
Yes. So More Than a Bundle Story exhibition will be featured at Hackney Museum from the 17th of June, but we do have a soft launch on the 19th from 5:30 till 7:30. Please tell everybody you know. I'd love to see you all there if you can. And what next? I'm working on 2 projects. Well, this project, and as well as I'm writing 2 books at the moment. One of collating all these interviews and other cultural aspects from, well, other cultural practices and I've lost my thought again. Cultural aspects into a publication, and along with this, I'm also working on a novel which has been inspired from the interviews that I carried out for this project.
Okay, thank you very much. Emma, last words. So we all need to go to Hackney.
Thank you, and I'm going to see all of you hopefully on the 19th at Hackney Museum.
Thank you very much. Thank you.